Yeah, I needed to get your attention, comrades. I think we should start our meeting. We can't wait forever, but I think we've got a decent amount of people to start the meeting. Um, Apologies about that. I needed to share the link to the group. Comrades, you know, our country is going through a lot at the moment. It's very difficult to even find something to celebrate uh, in today's terms. But yesterday, our ladies did us proud, and I think it's in order to actually congratulate them. This is not a small achievement. This is actually huge. You know, they'll be going to the World Cup as African champions. Yeah, and it is something that we need to be proud of. And I believe they are coming back on Tuesday. Those who have capacity, I think they must go to the airport and welcome them because I think they deserve a hero's welcome, if I can use that word. Yeah, but no, they did well and they played beautiful football. I think this was the sixth attempt, if I'm not mistaken, and Nigeria has been beating us all the way. Fortunately, Nigeria was not in the final, but we managed to beat them in the opening game. So congratulations uh, to Banyana Banyana. Thank you very much for taking time today to attend this important discussion. The only item on the agenda will be the energy policy and the energy mix that we'll be talking about. We have a guest speaker who will help us to unpack. And this meeting is arranged in preparation for the policy conference. Because when you go to policy conference, comrades, we need to be armed with nothing else but knowledge. Because when you debate these issues, you must debate from an informed position. We know what is happening out there. Eskom has been in the news. IPPs are in the news. There's also this thing called decommissioning of coal plants and so forth. So we need to understand what does those things mean to ordinary people, including us. So before I start this meeting, I just want to say, you know, part of our revolutionary theory, comrades, there's a concept that we refer to as the National Democratic Revolution. In the main, it is the program of the ANC. And this program, what does it seek to achieve? It seeks to achieve the National Democratic Society. What does that mean? You know, in biblical terms, I'm talking about the Christian Bible now. When Moses freed the Israelites from Egypt, they said they were going to a promised land. And in ANC's theory, when you talk about a national democratic society, we're actually referring to a society that will be living in that promised land. So it's an ideal that we must seek to achieve. And it's a process. It's not a destination of some sort, as long as there are South Africans who will still need to build that society. And our theory also continues and say, to achieve that NDR, we have 5 pillars. We've got the economy as one of the pillars, because we say you can't build a prosperous society without a growing economy. Secondly, we have a state as another pillar. We are saying you can't achieve what you want to achieve without a developmental state agenda. And we want a state that will be able to intervene where is necessary, able to regulate, to protect ordinary people, and at the same time, to drive this developmental agenda. And one of the pillars is what we refer to as mass mobilization. You can't lead yourself. You must be able to lead society. And the society must believe in you that you'll be able to provide solutions for their problems. And another pillar is what we refer to as international relations, because we must also accept that we are not operating in a silo. We are part of the global village. And in that process, we need to understand what is happening globally, and we need to have friends globally that are aligned to our agenda. And another pillar is what we refer to as battle of ideas. Now, this is a very important pillar because that is where an agenda gets to be driven. And if you're not winning in that space, other people will drive an agenda for you. Now, this discussion today, I themed it under the pillar of battle of ideas. But however, it does touch on another pillar of the economy. It also touches on another pillar of the state. Because battle of ideas, we start winning the minds of the people in the agenda that we want to drive through these engagements and through the debates that people have, whether in their homes or whether at church or in their social gatherings. People always talk about politics. But if you do not understand the agenda that the ANC is pursuing, it will be very difficult for you to even convince the ordinary people who are in doubt about our agenda. So this discussion today is very important because we're discussing energy. Now, I thought I should also inform comrades that in 2012, the ANC adopted what we call today a very known document called the National Development Plan, the NDP. And in that NDP, there are a number of targets that the government has set out for us. In fact, that document prepares South Africa for the future. And the target was 2030. And 2030, by the way, is just a few years from now. And this document was adopted by the ANC and cabinet in 2012. Little did we know, obviously, that there will be so many things that will happen in between, but it is something that we needed to achieve. Just an extract from that document. There's an abridged version. It's called an executive summary of the NDP. You can find it on the internet. There's a section that talks about the element of decent standard of living, because that is, in a sense, what this plan rather seeks to achieve. We need to improve the standard of living of ordinary human beings. The National Development Plan makes a firm commitment to achieving a minimum standard of living which can be progressively realized through multi-pronged strategy. In this plan, we do not define that the minimum standard of living, but we do provide a framework of what it is envisaged as a minimum standard of living. And there's an illustration in this document. I'm just going to read the certain parts that talks about what are the elements that will mean that people have a decent standard of living. One of the things they speak about is nutrition, clean environment, recreational and leisure, employment, healthcare, safety and security, education and skills, transport, housing, water, sanitation, and electricity. So the plan says if you address those issues, we'll be basically addressing the standard of living of the people of South Africa. It continues further. I'm just selected a certain extract for the purpose of this discussion. The document then says the electricity crisis in 2008 and other recent development has exposed institutional weakness related to state-owned companies responsible for the network infrastructure. Averting such problems requires a clear institutional arrangements, transparent, shareholder compact, clean lines of accountability and sound financial models to ensure sustainability. This is what it's saying. And I want us to underline these words: transparent, shareholder compact, clean lines of accountability and sound financial models. And it continues further, says, it's got few proposals how to fix the problems that were identified then, which is from 2008 until 2012. You may recall that there was a diagnostic report first, and then thereafter they provide some form of solutions. One of the things that they talk about is the infrastructure investment, that they say it should be prioritized. Building a new coal line to unlock coal deposits in the Waterberg. Existing coal lines in the Central Basin and upgrading the coal line to Richards Bay and iron ore line to Saldanha. It continues further, says, constructing infrastructure to import liquid fuel natural gas and increasing exploration to find domestic gas feedstock to diversify our energy mix. Because today we are going to unpack this thing of what do we mean by energy mix. It continues further, it says procuring at least 2,000 megawatts of renewable energy by 2030, importing electricity from the region, and it says decommissioning 11,000 megawatts of aging coal-fired power station and stepping up investment in energy efficiency. So if we need to decommission 11,000, at least that's what this document is saying, you must have a plan of 20,000 more. And in this sense, they talk about renewable energy. Chapter 4 of this NDP talks about economic infrastructure. It says the objective, the proportion of the people with access to electricity grid should rise to at least 90% by 2030, who must have access to electricity. The country would need additional 29,000 megawatts of electricity by 2030. About 10,900 of existing capacity is to be retired, implying a new build we need 40,000 megawatt of capacity. The document, the way it has been structured, and how the research has been done, it says by 2030 we basically need 40,000 additional megawatts. It says 11,000 will be retired. We need to build 29,000, and to replace the 11,000, we need additional 11,000, which means in total we need 40,000 megawatts. And I don't know where we are in as far as that plan is concerned. In fact, 3 weeks ago, if not a month back, we had Comrade Kenzani here, who is heading economic transformation within the ANC. In fact, as she was presenting, she was actually saying the way they've done an assessment now in terms of the NDP, some of the targets will not be met in 2030. Maybe some of the things we can actually see with the load shedding that we are having now. Under actions, it says, bullet point, coal. We must ensure domestic security of coal supply for existing power stations through industry compact, more comprehensive coal field planning, and opening up of the Waterberg for coal mining. This is what the document is saying. And I think it's important, comrade, As we unpack this discussion, it is also important to refer back to this document to see where we are diverting. And as to whether this diversion, what informs this diversion. Because the document here, as it is a policy of the ANC and also policy of government. It continues further, says we need to invest new heavily hauled rail corridor to Waterberg coalfield upgrade and Central Basin coal network and expand export capacity in line to Richards Bay. When you read these few extracts, you can actually see that coal is still a very important factor in our energy supply. It does not say anywhere that we need to discard coal or we need to accelerate this to have IPP. There's a plan. Hence, we talk about the energy mix. I just thought I make those opening remarks for this subject today. Our guest speaker today, Mr. Jacob Maroga, he will help us to unpack what is meant by all these things that I've just said. He needs no introduction, ladies and gentlemen, comrades. He is the former Eskom CEO. In fact, I think the first load shedding was under his watch, just to put it. Yeah. But he will then explain to us what actually led to that. And today's session is not any way to bash Eskom or to bash the current leadership of Eskom. We want to be informed so that we can make the right intervention. And as a branch, we took a resolution that we'll consult widely to find the solutions for this country. Mr. Jacob Maroga.
Thanks, Chairperson, and thanks for the invitation, comrades. And I just want to check time so that I don't get excited, because this is a subject I can get excited about, and I think, can I do 30 minutes of speaking? Then we can have an open session, and I'm not too sure the time in terms of how much time we're going to spend here, so that just maybe let's talk about that.
No, I'm happy with that. I was intending that at least by 4 o'clock, I think we would be done with the session. But I just hope that maybe there won't be too much appetite. But I'm just hoping that by then we would have covered more of what we needed to cover, and people will be armed with information,
Okay.
so that they can be able to engage in their own personal capacity in this battle of ideas.
Okay. No, thanks, Chairperson. So maybe let me just talk about myself so that I think people understand my background. I'm an electrical engineer by training. And I took up electrical engineering or engineering when it was not fully understood and fully popular in the African community. So when I did my Form 3, I didn't think I'll do sciences because I didn't do well in my first attempt in science. And I had to repeat my Form 3 because in 1976, I couldn't write exams, so, Then by luck, the school I went to do my second attempt on Form 3 had excellent teachers in maths and science. And my marks from 40% just changed to the 80s. So by the time I was doing matric, I knew I'm going to do the sciences. And I was quite fortunate that before I finished matric, I got offered a scholarship by Anglo to do engineering. And we were the first few Africans to actually go to Wits to do engineering. At the time, if you are an African, you want to do engineering at WITS, you needed to apply for what is called ministerial consent. So all black people were not allowed to go to WITS to do that. So that's my history with engineering. Went to the mines, worked at the explosive company at Motorfontein, worked at Mosgas, worked at Sasol, joined Eskom 1995, just after 1994. Spent 15 years there, and I've been in the energy space for probably close to 30 years. So that's my background. Now, coming back to the issues of energy, but before we talk to energy, I just wanted to take you through how the economic and political development of South Africa has evolved, because one of the things, having been at Eskom and even leaving Eskom, I had to reflect about how the industrial energy complex in South Africa evolved. Because it's in understanding that we can begin to understand what is happening and unpack things much more strategically. I think all of us know the history of South Africa, starting 1652. I don't want to go there. But I want to start in the mid-1800s, the discovery of diamonds and gold. 1864, I think, is diamonds, and 1870-something is gold. That fundamentally transformed the economy of this country. So before then, as you know, we had British colonies, Natal and the Cape, and then we had Boer republics, the Free State and Transvaal. In fact, the Afrikaners have run away from the Cape because of persecution by the English. They decided to go inland, and the English says, you can go, there's nothing there. Until, of course, they stumble into huge amounts of gold. And the British said, you're not going to have that gold yourselves. That gold is going to belong to the British Empire. And people like Rhodes were very instrumental in the formation of the country called South Africa. The boundaries of South Africa to actually have one united South Africa under the Union of South Africa was a mining project. It was not a political project. It was a mining project driven by the Cecil Rhodes and driven by mining interest in Europe. Right? So that is important. Then comes 1990. Okay, let me just step back. Of course, the Boers resisted this agenda of the taking over of the Transvaal. There was a Boer War, which lasted until 1903, 04, right? Then they surrendered, and then started what is called the Union of South Africa. That's when whites in South Africa united to say, this is a white country with a native problem. So us as white, we need to unite and have a clear relationship with the native. In fact, if you want to understand the thinking, you need to go and read a speech by Jan Smuts when he was still 25 years old in 1895, defining what he thinks the future of this country has to be. Because Jan Smuts became instrumental up until the early 1940s in terms of the creation of this country. Now, why is that important? It is important in that as the industrialists were developing the mining economy, they needed supplementary services, rail, steel, and power to power these industries. So young Afrikaners were called. The first one was Hendrik van der Bijl. He was 23 years old, a PhD working in America. Jan Smuts called him and says, look, I want to industrialize South Africa. Give me the formula. And Van der Bijl said, steel, power, rail, and funding. Right? So that architecture started Eskom, ISCO, IDC, Transnet to actually industrialize this country. So The long and short of what I'm trying to tell you is the entire architecture of developing the mining sector and developing the state-owned sector was driven by mining industrialization. Now, that's the first point I just wanted to make. The second point I wanted to make is unpacking how the state-owned enterprises were managed. They were not formed to be corporations. They were formed to be industries. When you go and look how the formation of these companies happened, they picked the brains in the Afrikaner community and told them that you're going to start a new industry around energy. It's going to be Eskom. You're going to start a new industry around steel. It's going to be called ISCO. Now, how they ran these industries is that they were given industry mandates, not company act, an industry mandate. You need to do what you need to do to make sure that South Africa has a steel industry, a power industry. Whatever investment you need to make, go find it. Whatever skills you need, go find it. It was not as if every time they needed anything, they needed to go back to government. They were given industry mandates, and since 1923, Eskom had an industry mandate to build electricity industry cheap and abundant across the country. That was the main foundation of Eskom. Now, and I think we'll deal with some of the issues as we go into the discussion. Now, come 1994, in fact, let me just give you this piece, especially for Eskom. Eskom was never explicitly a state-owned enterprise. It was a commission with a special act called the Eskom Act. And it defined how it must be managed, how it must fund, but it was never defined as a state-owned enterprise. In fact, even in 1994, or after 1994, in 1995, there was a debate within Eskom, with the managers at Eskom, a debate with government. Say, look, there's nothing that says Eskom is a state-owned enterprise, because Eskom has never started with government capital. Up until 1994, government has never put a cent in Eskom. The commission went and raised money and integrated that money into the tariffs. So people were arguing, no, actually, technically, if you want to know who put the money, it's the customers, not the government. Then in 2002, Jeff Hadebe actually had to have special government act, what is called Eskom Conversion Act, to explicitly say the state owned Eskom, because up until then it was not clear. So post 1994, what happened? When around that time, around the world, there was a big mood around privatizing state-owned enterprises. And Margaret Thatcher was at the forefront of that. So for electricity, it was to say, break up the monopolies, break up the vertical chain. For electricity company, it's normally you've got generation, you've got transmission, you've got distribution. So the idea is break the three up, have a separate generation. In some cases, have different companies that do generation, have a single company that does transmission, and a few companies that do distribution. And there was also a move to say separate the wires from the energy sales. The wires is the infrastructure. The energy sales is what flows in the wires. So in 1998, the government put up what is called the 1998 Energy White Paper. And it was articulating that very fact, that Eskom is going to be broken down into three separate parts, and certain of the, generation may be different companies, and distribution, in fact, in this distribution, there was going to be 6 companies that will also include the municipal electricity sector. So that was the plan then, and it was called the Energy White Paper of 1998. included in the distribution industry restructuring. And in the 1998 white paper, there was something else that says, Eskom, you will not be allowed to build any new capacity. Because we want new capital into the industry, we're going to get what is called independent power producers. They will come and build the next capacity. The biggest problem with that at those times was the following. We, as South Africa, we were the cheapest in terms of the price of electricity. Now, when your price is cheap to the client, it is not good for the producer. So international investors who were interested in coming to South Africa used to ask, so what's your selling price of electricity? Right? And when they compare what we're selling it at and what they are selling it at, where they come from, there used to be a huge gap. And they'll ask you again, are you sure? I mean, for instance, I'm just giving figures. They'll be selling at 5 US cents. And we tell them we're selling at 1 US cents. So this guy just opened their eyes and said, are you sure? You can actually make money on that. Now, the reason IPPs were not interested in South Africa, because the price was too low. They couldn't invest and make their returns. So that was the first difficulty in IPPs in 1998. So when around 2007 came, and that was the time we anticipated we're going to run out of capacity. Government said to Eskom, we can't wait anymore, we're going to wait for IPPs. You, Eskom, go and build new capacity. That's how we started building Midupi, Kusile, and Ingula. The biggest problem, of course, is the funding problem. We were given a task to build, but we were not given the cash. And it was assumed that you will get the cash either through borrowings or through higher tariffs. And some of those things didn't happen. And we'll talk about them as the current financial crisis of Eskom because of that. Now, Chairperson, you said I started load shedding in 2008. Let me not a problem. So, load shedding as a term is an international term of matching supply and demand if you don't have enough supply. And in South Africa it has been done, but probably not as extensively. But the biggest load shedding that I got involved in is not actually 2008, it's 2004. So in 2004 we had a problem. So the way the country is organized is that most of our generation plant are in Mpumalanga, and because that's where the coal is. And we transport electricity through transmission lines, for the Cape, for instance, through the Free State to the Cape. In the Cape, we've got a Quebec nuclear station, Quebec. It's got about 2,000 megawatts. So in 2004, we had a grid problem. So we couldn't supply through the grid. And Quebec also had problems. Then we actually partially blacked out the Western Cape. And if somebody says we haven't had a blackout, we had a partial blackout of a few days where the entire Cape Town was in darkness. Then because we were short for a few months, we actually had to do load shedding until we can fix the problems that we had with Quebec and the transmission lines. So we did scheduled load shedding in the Cape from 2004. In 2007 and 2008, it started nationally, and it was because, what we had, there's a problem was that we didn't have enough reserve margin. So one unit, one power station trips, you get into trouble. So I just wanted to give you that context. Then I think the other theme that I just need to tackle is the theme of renewable IPPs. So at first, the IPPs are not only going to be renewable, it was going to even be base load. But it became difficult to bring very big volumes of electricity given the price. And I think this is I'll talk about it now. So the government decided, let's bring renewables, let's bring them through the IPPs, and let's have a IPP office. Let's have bid windows. People come and bid, we choose the cheapest, and we connect through Eskom. Now, even then, with the initial renewable IPPs, the price problem was still an issue. So the first IPPs, just to give you orders of magnitude, the solar IPP will come at 4 rand per unit, right? Whereas the average cost of Eskom is under 1 rand. So Eskom is buying for 4 rand, but selling for 1 rand. Okay? Now, look, there was some rationale into it. The rationale being, if we really want to bring IPPs and if we really want to bring renewables, there may be a price to pay, right? And in the bigger scheme of things, you bring in maybe 2,000 megawatts against a 35,000 megawatt system. So that 2,000 megawatts is not going to make a bigger dent because you are blending it into the overall price of electricity. But what has happened, of course, the price of solar has come down. The price of solar now is just under, over a rand, right? And the price of, the average price of Eskom is also in that ballpark figure, from 4 rand to where it is. But you must understand other things, other dynamics about the IPPs. So how do the IPPs work in South Africa currently? So the bidders, those who won and became preferred bidders, they have to sign what is called a long-term power purchase agreement with Eskom, a long-term PPA. And that PPA is put in a way which we call take or pay. Take or pay means Eskom has to prioritize the electrons that come out of the IPP before they use their own. Otherwise, they're going to pay even if they didn't take that electrons. That's just how it works. That's the first level, and it's a 20 to 25-year contract. The second support for IPPs is that when you go into the National Treasury contingent liability section, where National Treasury says, what liabilities do we have, particularly where we have guarantees? You'll find a line there called IPPs. So every IPP contract has a guarantee from National Treasury. And to date, it's about 200 billion that is sitting in the contingent liability section of National Treasury. So renewable IPPs are supported by Eskom's long-term contract, and they're supported by National Treasury with the guarantee scheme. So it's not as if it's all private capital. It's actually state-supported capital. Because with that state support, they can't fund the IPPs. Now, also in terms of the renewable IPPs, I need to bring in another dynamic, which we'll talk about then, impact in terms of the current load shedding. So, when you look at generation technologies, each technology has got what is called a capacity factor. A capacity factor means how much of the time you can use the maximum capacity of that particular technology. Each technology has what is called nameplate capacity. That's the maximum that you can get. Now, in general, and these are general figures, and sometimes each country may have different, for different reasons. The best in terms of capacity factor is nuclear. In South Africa, it's about 74. When you go to the US, they get about 92% capacity factor. Why? Nuclear, once you start it, you run it for until the fuel is spent, you stop it, refuel it, and you run. That's why it's got a high capacity factor. Then you've got coal. Coal ranges between 55, 60, sometimes 70. You have to stop it more frequently because of its technology to fix. So it's got about that capacity factor. When you come to renewables, they go lower. Solar is about 25%, which means 75% of the time is not there. Wind is about 35, which means 35% of the time is not there. In solar, there's nuances as well. There's a thing called concentrated solar, which works differently. It's got a higher capacity factor, but also in the range of about 40% capacity factor. So these are important because you must never allow somebody to add megawatts willy-nilly, add megawatts of coal and megawatts of solar and say, I've got, no, you can't. Because those are different technologies. If you don't understand the capacity factor, you're going to mess up. I mean, I see people today, they say we're going to add 40,000 megawatts of solar to replace 40,000 megawatts of coal. It's all nonsense. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the lessons that we've seen in Europe. Now, the current crisis. What's the problem with the current crisis? Why are we in load shedding? First of all, let me say to you, when I left Eskom in 2009, and I'm not going to give you figures, I'm just going to give you the facts. The demand was higher then than it was today. The demand of electricity was higher then than it is today. But the capacity which was added, we've added Midupi, we've added Kusile, we've added Ingula since 2009, and we've added 6,000 megawatts of renewable. So all in all, in the Eskom system, we've got about 50,000 megawatts of installed capacity. You add 6,000 of renewable, you've got about 56,000 of capacity. The demand that is envisaged is 32,000. So 56, we can derate it to 52 because there's things called nominal. Let's just say 52,000 megawatts of available dispatchable capacity against a demand of 32,000. We are not able to meet 32,000 today, but we've got an installed capacity of about 52 to 56. That is the crisis. And why is that? Is because what we call the energy availability factor of Eskom has gone down. It came from 90%. Now it's about under 60%, right? So that deterioration in performance is the thing that's a direct cause of load shedding today. Now, there are many people giving many reasons. The stations are old. You can't run them. They're beyond their useful lives. An engineering asset is not like a human being. When we say after 70, you know, finally you retire. No, an engineering asset, you can renew it in perpetuity. In the end, it's the matter of economics and efficiency. And sometimes you may say this technology is no longer efficient. This new technology, I'm going to buy new technology. But if you want to keep it going for 8 years, you can do it. There are 8-year-old stations in the world. So you can do it. In the end, it's economics and efficiency. And I can tell you, the Eskom fleet is not the oldest in the world. So, and if somebody talk about age, what they must produce is, this is the age of each unit, this is its performance, and let's see the correlation. I can tell you now, there's no correlation between age and performance. In the end, there are many other factors. How the station is managed, and other logistics. Like, for instance, other stations, their problem is coal, and those things. But it's never, the issue of age, I think we need to deal with it clearly. But in the bigger scheme of things, there is a big lobby, and I think we need to appreciate this. There's a big lobby to move away from coal to renewables. Big. Now, let me talk about renewables personally in terms of what is my view about renewables. I think renewables are good as an energy mix because this is an energy mix discussion. The renewables have got their own advantages. One advantage is that once you put up a panel, the sun is free, right? That's a big advantage. The price of these things have come down, as I've indicated, from 4 rand to 1 rand, and it's still going down. So if you get more of the renewables in the right mix, they will reduce our price because their prices have come down. That's the thing that today, because of greenhouse emissions, renewables are still the best technology to mitigate against emissions. We haven't, well, I'll talk to nuclear differently because it's also a non-emitting technology, but renewables so far are the best technology to allow us to limit emissions. But what renewables won't do is to stop load shedding. Right? There is an organization within Eskom called System Operator, and at some point, in fact, when I was dealing with the Cape issue, I was a managing director of transmission, and system operations was reporting to me. So when I remember clearly when the Cape went down, it was about 2:30 in the morning. So I was woken up and I had to go to Germiston, system operator, and actually sit there to understand why we've gone down. Now, that organization is the one that on a minute-by-minute basis is looking at the demand, is looking at the supply, and is matching those two. And if they see there's an imbalance, they'll have emergency levers. If those levers are done, then they come and do load shedding. Right? But what they will not do is to avoid load shedding because they think there's going to be some solar or some wind. They're not going to do that. There's 6,000 megawatts of renewables. They don't consider it at all. There may be the small part of what is called CSP, which has some dispatchability that they may consider. But in general, they don't consider renewables as part of the levers to avoid load shedding. Now, so when people say, let's add 10,000 more of renewables to avoid load shedding, just know I call it engineering fantasies because it doesn't exist. Okay? Now, there are certain technologies that may start coming to help make renewables more dispatchable. I'm sure you've heard about battery storage, right? Where, when the sun is there, the wind is there, you store some of the electricity in a battery, and then you can actually use that power to feed into the grid to avoid load shedding. That is possible. But people I've heard figures that they want to install 5,000 megawatts of battery storage in South Africa in the next 24 months. The US has less than 5,000 megawatts of battery storage. Right? China, I think, is about 3,000 megawatts. Right? So we think we're going to do 5,000 megawatts in 2 years. Right? So just forget about it. Yes, batteries are going to be very useful to this discussion about renewables, but let's not fool ourselves that we'll be able to resolve this current load shedding with battery storage, because the technology and the cost of the technology is still not mature enough to get there. International lessons. So Germany used to be punted as the country that has successfully managed to run a modern economy on renewables. But when we now understand the dynamics, and especially Putin has helped us, because what Putin has done with the Ukraine war, he unplugged the natural gas to Europe. And Germany was the one that exported most of their natural gas from Europe, from Russia, for their total industry, but also for their electricity industry. But natural gas in Germany is about 12 to 15%. So you unplug 12 to 15%, the whole system comes crashing. Yeah? So what Germany did in terms of renewables, the German system has a demand of about 80,000 megawatts. It's almost, in terms of, it's almost twice, their demand is almost twice what we have as capacity. But they've installed 120,000 megawatts of renewables. They've got about 60,000 of fossil fuel. Right? In fact, it's about 100, because the total installed capacity of Germany is 220 gigawatts. Right? But their demand is 80. Right? So the point is, with so much capacity of renewables, why would Germany go into an energy crisis when Putin just unplugged 12%? Which shows that you cannot run today with this current technology, the state of technology. You cannot run a modern economy on renewables alone. You still need baseload dispatchable power to support your energy system. So, as some of you may know that the European Union is in crisis because of Putin's unplugging of the natural gas, and it's also in economic crisis. And it's a fresh, good lesson for us to learn. And because of that, the European Union have decided we're going to term nuclear green. So nuclear was not green, but now the union, politicians said, okay, we agree. Nuclear is now green. Natural gas is now green, all right? Because if they don't declare that, there are certain accords that they've made that will bring in fines and so forth. But it's an important lesson that the European Union can decide when something is green and when something is not green. But also, they can tell other people that we can pay for you to close down your coal, right? But when Putin unplugs, they just start up their coal, right? And they actually come and buy from you. Says, shut up your coal, but we want your coal. Right? You must understand this dynamic as we move forward. Now, climate change. Myself as an engineer, I'm convinced that climate change is a reality. That if we don't do anything in reducing our emissions, we're going to have a catastrophe, and we must accept that as scientific fact. We must then have a way of having technologies that are less emitting, and the world says by 2050 we want to be carbon neutral, and I think we need to support that. But we should also understand other dynamics. You'll be surprised to know that the entire African continent. Okay, so let me start somewhere else. You see, carbon emission and climate change is not what we are producing now. It's what we've been producing since the Industrial Revolution. So there are studies that have went back and said, since 1750, when we started using a fossil fuel, who has contributed the most in terms of what's out in the atmosphere? Africa has contributed 3%. 90% is between Europe, America, and Asia. Right? South Africa, 1.3%. Right? But of course, the narrative is that Africa is going to be the worst hit by climate change, so you must contribute more. But I think India and China are resisting. And India and China are saying, you, Europe and America, you had 200 years of industrialization using the best fuel in terms of industrialization there is. And you put this stuff in the air. Now when we want to industrialize, you say, oh, you can't use that. Right? So what options do we have? And that's an important geo-strategic issue to be dealt with. That's why, given we know that climate change is a reality, but in dealing with it, we need to understand the history, the impact, because currently we don't have many other technologies that are able to power large-scale industrialization and economic development. And it is an important issue that, as we move forward, we need to be thinking about. Now, on my last point, an energy mix. So in South Africa, coal is our largest, and we've got lots of coal in this country. If climate change was not an issue, that would have been the thing to stay with. Of course, because of emission, we need to think about alternatives or reducing our dependence on coal. But I don't support just unplug coal with renewables, and I've just told you now. Now, the other dynamics, natural gas emit 50% less than coal. And that's why Germany went to natural gas and didn't close their coal station. They mothballed them. There's a difference between mothballing and closing. Mothballing says, just in case, I'll come back to you. Closing, you shut it down. So they didn't. So it was also always insurance. Now, what is our view of gas as in fact, in some, in the energy mix discussion, they call natural gas a transitional fuel, because while you're finding other sources that are less emitting, you can go to natural gas as a stopgap measure. That's what Germany did. So they mothballed their coal, and then they brought in Russian gas. What is the position in South Africa? We don't have our own major natural gas deposits. Mozambique has got a lot. In fact, we are piping to Secunda natural gas from Mozambique. There's possibilities that you can begin to pipe a natural gas from Mozambique to do gas to power in South Africa. That's the one option. The other option is what is called liquefied natural gas. That's where you take the gas and liquefy it and make it, make it the volume less to be able to transport it. So, and with that, you can trade in the world. You can, there are ships all over that transport natural gas, liquefied natural gas from where there's more natural gas to places that there isn't. So 2 options we have in terms of natural gas. We can pipe more from Mozambique, or we can build facilities in our ports to handle liquefied natural gas. And those things are being considered, but those things are also contested, because Europe has been saying, even liquefied natural gas is a fossil fuel, and it emits. So that's something that we need to be aware of. We've got nuclear, and nuclear is the non-emitting fuel option. The problem with nuclear is nuclear safety and nuclear waste. Those are the things that still need to be dealt with. Now, on nuclear safety, when you come to nuclear, if you run a nuclear station, you become networked into a community of societies that have got nuclear in their mix. And you get connected by the issue of safety. Because any safety issues anywhere in the world impact all of us. Right? Yokoshima caused the closure of Germany's nuclear station, the Yokoshima disaster. So one incident anywhere in the world, it sets alarm bells for whoever does nuclear. So they are World Association of Nuclear Operators. So they police each other so that we don't have an incident anywhere, because any incident impacts the entire community of nuclear operators. So nuclear is that. Now, also nuclear, there are new dynamics, driven by the crisis in Europe. One, I've told you that nuclear is now considered green. Germany was going to close its nuclear station. They are now suspending that. So there's a new move, and with the German crisis, there's a new move to say, maybe nuclear is the savior in terms of climate change. Because renewable, we know we can't run a modern economy with renewable alone, but with nuclear and its capacity factor, it is a good option. So what must we solve? We must solve the safety, we must solve the nuclear waste. Then we've got in fact, some people are calling it the energy source of the civilization, that will save the civilization because of climate change. Hydro, we don't have much hydro, but we've got countries around that have hydro. We get hydro from Mozambique. The Congo's got lots of, the Congo, and I've been there, there's a thing called the Inga Dam, one of the biggest rivers in the world. In fact, even when I was still a student, our lecturer used to say, Southern Africa has got enough hydro to power the entire Africa and half of Europe with hydro. And when you go to some of these countries and you see some of the rivers, you understand why. But we have never been able to commercialize it because of political and economic issues. But hydro is here in the region, but we have not been able to harness it. Solar and wind, I've talked about. There are limits, but we can still do more. Battery storage is an important technology of the future, but the economics and scale is still an issue, and we'll see how that comes. Distributed generation is when clients use for their own, and this is the issue that has been brought about by the 100 megawatt limit. So government says, if you build for your own and it's less than 100 megawatts, you don't have to get a license, you can just go ahead. But if you're going to do solar, it's not going to help much the entire grid. It may reduce the demand from the grid, but it's not going to help in terms of load shedding, but it's a new dynamic. Yeah, I think we may talk about green hydrogen. So here you have a technology where you can create hydrogen from solar, and you term it green because the source is green, and hydrogen can be used as a fuel to fuel certain processes, industrial processes. You can even do transportation with hydrogen. It is a technology to watch, but currently the economics are still very difficult, but a lot of the industrialized world is actually preparing themselves for green hydrogen, because you can actually, for instance, come to South Africa and produce green hydrogen, put it into the ship and take it to Europe. Then you can store and transport green energy, which is a big issue, but the economics still have to come down. So colleagues, those are the thoughts that I thought I will open with, and we can now have a general discussion to pursue whatever topics you believe are critical to pursue. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Maroga, for that presentation. I think, comrades, I think you'd agree with me that this is a very complex topic, but I think he managed to unpack it. At least now today, when they talk about replacing this with that, the first question is, what's the capacity factor? Because that's the main idea of this discussion. It's because now we must not allow people to drive the agenda. And it's very important to defend your position if you're not informed. Now, this was a very important discussion because at least now we are able to research further about this subject, and all these words that you were saying, you'll be able then to remember all these discussions. You know, a few days ago, we had a call with him, and I was saying immediately after I invited him to come here, I attended some seminar. And in that seminar, there was a presentation made about environmental social governance. That is the new thing that is playing now, international. So if you're a corporate, you're an entity, as part of your annual report, you must be able then to say what is your company doing to contributing towards less emissions, climate change, and so forth. And immediately after that discussion, I called Comrade Barbara Chris. She is a Minister of Environmental Affairs and Fishery and so forth. And I spoke about this thing because I asked a question in that seminar. I said, in us complying with this new regulation that has been introduced, in light of what Mr. Maroga just said, that, you know, we need to industrialize. We've got the mining sector, we've got the Sassos of this world, and how then do we comply at the expense of everything that we need to do in as far as economic growth is concerned? Can you afford that in this stage as in now? And you might have seen the videos going on social media about President Biden saying we're going to help our friends in South Africa, to the way that he's using actually. I was actually sharing that with Comrade Braba, is to accelerate the decommissioning of coal into renewable. So had I known then, I probably could have said, hey, what capacity effect? Because now we know you don't just replace something as a base load with, issues of renewable, wind, solar, and so forth. So, but in saying this, comrade, politics are very complicated. And also speaks to leadership that we have in the country. It says, who are the people that will be able to defend our positions? Because certain things cannot be imposed. It must be informed by having done your own thorough analysis and having considered the balance of evidence that you have for you to make a particular position or a particular decision to say, this is where we're going, and it is formed by ABC. While yes, we know that we need renewable, but it just explained now, renewables as a technology, yes, is good. We need to look after the environment and so forth. But at the current crisis, will it help? Well, maybe not. In summary, and just adding to what you were saying. But anyway, comrades, this is not Tumisan and Mr. Maroga's show. We need to hear your thoughts based on this input and the presentation. We'd like to hear your thinking, what needs to happen, because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, and it's in there. Comrade Praveen is busy. No, but we read about it, and we know that there is this accelerated push of we need to break Eskom into 3 units, and I'm happy that I was able to unpack it, because at least for where I'm sitting, I did not know the context behind it, the history behind it. But clearly there was a white paper, but it is informed by something else as well, as to what was happening probably in Europe and so forth. So as we engage in trying to find solutions, we also need to understand who is pushing the agenda. Because our sovereignty, I was arguing in the policy conference that when we're discussing balance of forces, and I was saying, in the balance of forces, it's not necessarily about who is our enemy and so forth. It's a very complex subject, because we also need to protect our sovereignty, economic interest, our commercial interest. Some of our commercial interest might be with people that we actually don't like, but we have to do it. And some of the things are pushed down our throats by the bullies of this world. So you need to understand, when are you making a move? You need to understand, when are you retreating? You need to understand at a particular time, and based on your analysis, who do you need to talk to for what, and for what gain for your country. The floor is open, Comrade. Comrade Sbu, I saw your hand. Yeah. Any other hand? Comrade.
No. Thanks, Chair. Sibulele Kyoto. Thank you, leadership. Your presentation was so spot on. I think we are more wiser in relation to this issue of energy. Just 4 points. I think 2 is going to be questions, and the other 2 is just going to be comments.
Sorry, Comrade, your mic, so that
Yes.
those who are
Okay.
listening online can be able to hear you.
Is it fine? Okay. No, I think the first question I would want to ask, and I think it's in line with your last comment. The 1998 white paper. I'm interested to find out how was it linked to ANC policy, because I think at times we in government we develop policies that are not necessarily linked to the mandate that we give ANC deployed cadres in government. And I think it's a very big problem. So I'm interested to just find out that, because the issue of 1998, as you've indicated it, and I think Comrade Tumsani had indicated, it was predominantly spearheaded by privatization in Britain, which is a neoliberal policy. And I'm not sure whether the issue of privatization is something that would want to still continue with, because the issue of the IPPs is still there. So to what extent do we then ensure that we build a solid state-owned entity, understanding the histories behind Eskom and all that? So I'm interested in that, the privatization regime, the IPP issues and everything else. And I think I appreciate the part about the renewable IPPs, because I think at times when these issues are discussed, one only thinks that IPPs are in relation to renewables. Then the second question, I know Comrade Dunza said we mustn't raise the issue of Eskom. If we've got a capacity of 50,000 and then you've got a demand of 32,000, what seems to be the problem? And in terms of turning it around, I think you did indicate the issues of management, which I think is the biggest problem. Issue of management, and I appreciate the fact that you indicate that age is not a factor. So how do we turn this thing around? Because I think I'm a person who's interested in solutions. I don't think we should talk more about the problems, but how do we then get out of this quagmire? I think the past 2 months, how long has this load shedding been? I think it's been hell. And I think we need to deal with it. Then the last comment from my side is on the making by at school back in, and I'm not that old. They stated that coal can be made green. The issue of how then you convert the emissions and turn them to something else. Can't we look there? Because I'm not convinced that you can work with the coal power stations and ensure that you get them to be green. And then I think a last comment as I sit down, I think the issue of climate change, I get it, but I don't get it. I think there's an element of propaganda, reversed apartheid in it. I'm a professional who did environmental studies as part of some of my modules. Like, for example, there's an N2 road that is planned between KZN and Eastern Cape. Sanral decides to move the alignment of that road out of the coastal line, all under the guise of, the environment is going to be messed up and anything. Yet you've got an N2 that were constructed during apartheid from Port Edward all the way up until to Ipingo, Pongola, up all the way. So why is it now that blacks are in government that we are so fixated about issues of environment? Yes, there is an element of, I agree, in terms of changing but I don't think it's in the manner in which it's being created. I think that those are my comments and questions, Chair. Thank you.
Can you maybe take maybe one more hand? Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for arranging this, Chairperson. I also have a few questions that I would like answered in Tata Maroga. My name is Nonkululego Hlongwa, so I'll introduce myself. You said that government introduced IPPs. So my question is, what role did Eskom play in the planning phase? Because as soon as the IPPs reached financial close and they were submitted, there was an issue of signing because of disagreements between the two departments. So if you can tell me what Eskom's plan was in that phase. And in hindsight now, what should we have done differently in the IPPs? We've seen recently a debate on skills, that there's no skills in Eskom. We would like to hear your thoughts on that, because you did mention that engineering skills just get better with time. So how is it that in Eskom it seems to be going the opposite way? And then my last question is, with Eskom sitting under state-owned enterprises and the policy sitting under DMRE, how did you navigate that? And I would love to hear your lessons on leadership in running behind those two masters, and which are critical in the success of Eskom. And then what should we do differently? Is it your thoughts that maybe Eskom should move under DMRE so that the policy on the energy mix could be realized? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Comrade Temlet.
Good afternoon, comrades. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for a very good presentation, Comrade Radde. I think my question is linked to what Comrade Sbu was saying. Hamlet Lomendlini. Sorry, comrades, about that. Hamlet Lomendlini. It's important that we do understand the problems. For us to be able to actually address them, we really need to understand what are the problems, and then we deal with them. I know that we don't want to get too controversial on Eskom, and I respect that. But you did mention something about the management, which is, I suspect, it's really a problem at Eskom. And I would like you to, for us, get a little bit deeper and delve deeper into what are the management problems that you're seeing at Eskom, and how should they be solved? And I think that for me is really important. But I do want to go back to a meeting or a sitting of SCOPA where the chairperson, if it's a chairperson of Eskom, stormed out or said something, to the meeting, which later forced the chairperson of SCOPA to apologize to her, which I think was really ridiculous, by the way, to do that. The mandate of the board is clear, all right? You're given a mandate, and if you do not perform against that mandate, something needs to be done. My question is, why is nothing being done currently with regards to the Eskom board and also the Eskom administration in terms of the performance or the non-performance that we're not seeing or we're seeing at Eskom right now?
You're putting Mr. Maroga in there.
No, we need to discuss this.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Yes, yeah.
Because otherwise I'm going to get lost in them. Yeah. There's the one about the role of the ANC in the 1998 energy paper, white paper. Yeah. To be quite honest, quite honestly, I was not too close to the energy, the discussion within the ANC, but at the time, there may be voices which were not in favor. I mean, like Bokosatu, were questioning some of the elements because it was clearly based on the classical model of Britain of privatization, breakup, state-owned enterprise, So there was that public contestation, but I can't go beyond that to say whether the ANC, policy was followed. Yes, and I think the issue of privatization then was quite strong. you see, in some cases, let me put it this way. We should not put the basket of privatization as in fact, private capital as a swear word in all cases. I'm going to give an example. China is industrializing using private capital, but state-led, right? So lots of private capital going to China, but China is very strategic in making sure that that private capital does not dictate the agenda. No industrial country can be isolated and use the fiscus alone to develop its infrastructure. But the issue is, are you strategic in dictating which sectors, how, the partnership, so that it is not the private capital that dictates policy. So for me, those are the discussions. So if you say, I want to expand my energy mix, but I want to invite international capital, it's a legitimate agenda. But that private capital must not be the tail that wags the dog. And for me, that's strategic to think about, because you will never, no government can have enough money to do everything. If you're going to put up nuclear, you may find that you're going to have to attract some big private capital to come in. But are you in control? That's going to be the issue that we need to think about. I'm going to come to the issue of Eskom management, because I'll come to that. The issue of clean coal, I think somebody talked about, can we use coal but limit emissions? There has been research, ongoing research around that. Is capturing the CO2 and sequestrating it. Some people are saying it's still on its way. Some people are saying it's a dream. But if we get a breakthrough on that, then because you see, it's not about burning coal. It's about the impact. If you deal with the impact, then coal, there's no problem with coal. So if we can deal with that technology, then we found a winner. IPP, there's the role of Eskom in the IPP. So, there was a controversy where government went out, got in preferred bidders, and then for the process to move forward, what the preferred IPP bidders must do is to sign a PPA with Eskom, and they also get an agreement to be connected. Because you see, as a preferred bidder, you say, for instance, I want to put up a solar farm in the Northern Cape. You must go to Eskom. Eskom must assess, how much megawatts do you want to put into the grid? Where is the next grid connection point? How much is it going to cost Eskom? And how much must be apportioned to the IPP? And how much must it be in the Eskom base? That's the first thing. So normally there's controversies around that. The second, I think the other controversies was that the Eskom management was just saying, why should we connect such an expensive source of electricity? And that was the controversy. But that was dealt with. So those are the two issues where Eskom plays a role, is the network connection and the power purchase agreement. Okay? Skills. It's difficult for me to verify whether the current issue about skills is there or not, because, but the general point is the following, in terms of how they want to solve it. Even if you've got problems with skills, you cannot have people in buses coming to Megawatt Park saying we are engineers, we're artisan, we're coming to fix Eskom. I mean, it's just wrong on so many levels. From HR perspective, from the people inside. In fact, there's almost an acceptance, and I think as citizens we should start thinking about this, an acceptance of bashing the Eskom people as the source of the problem. The employees, they are greedy, they want increases, they are too many, they are lazy, they are sabotaging. I just think that there's just too much of that, which I don't think most of it is valid. Right? If you want to run this entity to the national So the question you must ask is, what's the end in mind? And are the people in the whole governance structure, the people who are going to take us there? Then the answer becomes obvious without having to point individual people. But I think we can talk about the current leadership just as a strategy. And I'm going to say this. Eskom is the 10th largest utility in the world. And when you move around, when we came into Eskom and move around the world, the kind of respect that Eskom has in many areas, running the biggest power station, running the highest voltage in terms of transmission line, having a nuclear station. The people of Eskom will be in committees, international committees, making contributions, right? So we need to ask ourselves, is it the Eskom we still want, right? Or we want a different Eskom? So for me, those are the critical points that I think we need to ask ourselves. So I think this answers the issue of what should be done with the board. You see, the board is also abused. I mean, you see, they didn't appoint themselves there. They are there. So somebody who should come in and say, okay, this is bigger than you, or in fact, there are 6 people that are supposed to be 15. You know, so you must look at the whole governance structure and say, is it fit for the purpose where we need to put Eskom? If you want to close down Eskom, you know, maybe the strategy is the right one. But if you want to take Eskom to, you know, where it can be, you should look at a different strategy. Then the issue of the reporting of Eskom. Okay, Eskom reports to DPE. Policy come from DMRE. But you must always understand, and this is how I experienced Eskom. You report to the entirety of government. Mr. Hlongwe is here. I'll tell you an incident to show that you report to everybody, including municipalities. So when we had a problem in Soweto, and I think Mr. Hlongwe was in charge of that, right? So him as part of government, even if it's local government, he was very irritated with Eskom doing the certain things what Eskom is doing and not listening to government, even if it's local government. So you know, it's not only the reporting of the particular line manager. When you go to Parliament, the chairperson of SCOPA, the chairperson of Public Enterprise, the chairperson of SCOA, thinks you report to him as a CEO. And so it's a very complex environment in terms of state-owned enterprise. However, what I see, and I think it's an issue that I think going forward we need to look at in terms of state-owned enterprises, is the following. Being state-owned doesn't mean you are state-managed. Some of these large state-owned companies internationally, they don't have this intimacy of dealing with politicians on a daily basis. They behave like a shareholder. We put in money, we give you the mandate, we'll see you once a year. You don't go to Parliament to answer SCOA. I mean, you go to SCOA, you go to SCOPA, you go to PME, and and you go into the provincial legislature, they can call you, the local government guys can call you. So it becomes very complex in managing that political environment. So what the Afrikaners did, they put people they trusted in there. They said, go and do it. We will meet. In fact, I don't think it was even, because when Eskom, you know, before it became a state-owned enterprise in 2002, there was never even an annual general meeting with government, because it was not seen as state-owned. You are a commission. There's a way to report to government, but it's not as if we as shareholders must tell you what to do. Right? So we've created this very difficult environment for anybody who operates in that space. Let me pause there, then we can yeah, sure.
And there's also a war room. Yeah. I think for me, and I'm abusing the platform now, but for me also, I just want to understand if the increase in prices, because I think over the past 10, 12 years or so, probably Eskom, the price of electricity cumulatively has probably increased by at least close to 100%, or maybe slightly more than that. And the question is it genuine price increases or is it really to accommodate the IPPs? Because as it were, we know that government said private sector must invest in the IPPs, and there was a question as to is it commercially viable or not. But then, since then, you can see how the price of it, I mean, now they just go to, is it what they call this energy regulatory, asking for some 32% or something like that. You know, I mean, it's absurd, you know, and it's basically killing each and everyone's, like the cost of electricity, when actually it was such an important asset in terms of economy in this country. Now it becomes this huge cost that we have to grapple with. I think for me, that is my question, if you can possibly assist with that. Comrades.
Thank you, Comrade Domsani. My name is Molly Dlamini. I'm a visitor. I'm from Ward 74. Thank you, Comrade Domsani, for the invite. And thank you, Ndate Maroga. I'll ask my questions quickly. You spoke about the demand of 32,000 megawatts and the availability of 50, because you said 6, we do not necessarily need to count. So what's the problem? Because we seem to have then a net availability of capacity of the megawatts. And in the past, they used to talk about low-grade coal, high-grade coal, how low-grade coal messes up the system. Can you shed some light on that and how it has affected the generation of coal and supply, of course? We have a state-owned mining company. How come the state mining company is not venturing into the greenfields in coal? Of course, maybe they wouldn't want to go to Anglo and say, give me some stake, like Botswana has. But and I know this is not necessarily your area, because your area is engineering, you know, as the developmental state, you know, how come, you know, from where you were standing, you know, coal, uranium, especially uranium, now that you spoke of nuclear, Inga what was wrong, the Inga project? Like, what about the political spoils? Maybe spoils is a wrong word. We invested so much in the DRC in terms of bringing peace, but we invest in peace and we live. What was the problem with the Inga project? And for me, from where I'm standing, the Inga project would have even brought peace, perhaps, because I'm sure we'd send our, you know, okay. Lastly, on the minerals that are needed for renewable energy, we hear that most of those minerals are in Ukraine and Russia, and now that there's war, Europe will look into Africa, and South Africa happens to have some of those minerals, and many countries that are currently in conflict. Are we awake as a country to those facts? And geopolitically, are we really looking into partnering with BRICS countries? Are we scared? Are we, the sovereignty that Comrade Domsani is talking about? Why are we allowing to be pushed? We were once pushed to open up tariffs, and we opened up even more than we were required to in the past in terms of liberalizing our economy and tariffs and all those things. Why do we seem to be a country that likes getting excited and doing things so fast that are not beneficial for our national interest at the expense of our people? Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. Maroga. Thanks for the presentation, and thank you for the invite, Comrade Tumsan. Mine is just two short questions, and thank you. I think you've brought so much clarity, but also in the clarity, there's so much questions, but I think you've put a picture for me that I understand very clearly, and thank you very much for that. I just want to go back to, I think you mentioned it, Comrade Dumsani, the sovereignty and the balances of forces. Last year, I think there was, I'm not sure if it's 250 billion or 350 billion that was given by, I think at Copenhagen something, I can't remember, the climate conference last year overseas. And it was, I don't want to use the word dodgy, but it was not clear whether it's a loan or a grant, and where will that money sit? Is it sitting at Treasury? Is it sitting at Eskom? Was it for Eskom per se? And whether if it's a loan, obviously, and again, that it will go to whoever borrows you. It comes with, there's a term, it's a biblical term, whoever borrows you owns you, So I want us to look into that. If it's a grant, yes, we'll appreciate it, But if it's a loan, obviously it will come with terms. And it's not clear where it sits and whether it's a loan or a mix of both, So I'm not sure if you've got information on that, and they call it just transition, and that's where I think the discussion over today. The second one, which is a bit of a concern for me, and I mean, we seem to be losing power. And I know I said I was a councillor candidate last year. And going to the voters, they will tell you ANC has failed us in terms of electricity. Yes, they won't understand this, the realities of what's happening. And I was in an energy conference, I think, in March, organized by Johannesburg City. And what the mayor said there was like, look, we're going to adopt the Western Cape system of doing things in terms of, I think Western Cape is doing something in terms of dealing with load shedding and stuff. And she said it very clearly, we're going to send a fact-finding team to go there and help us, deal with that. And from a political point, that really means, because Western Cape seems to be doing their own thing or having, it's more like a own province, detached from South Africa. And it comes as if DA it's much more, doing better than our comrades, And that's a concern for me, because when it goes out there, it's like, no, DA is doing all well, And we're being pushed as comrades, even if you go as a councillor or mayor, it's like, no, you guys cannot handle electricity issues, basic things. And that's a concern for me, Going back to our elections, and I mean, we've got elections just around the corner in 2024. And the message is clear. If you cannot deal with load shedding, ANC, please, we're voting you out. And that's, for me, it's a major, major concern, Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks, Chairperson. My name is Brian Tamsanga Owen Woktol Hlongwa. Those are my given names. Others have earned in the street. Thanks. To me, the word comrade is not a swear word. I'll still refer to you as Comrade Maroga. Is not just a minister. It's been part of the big struggle in this country of rebuilding South Africa, ensuring that a better life does get deployed. So indeed, in my previous life, as a public representative, no, in fact, both as an official and later as a municipal council, the creation of City Power, Johannesburg Water, I was involved as an official. And when we were established, I was the first MMC to oversee them. So I interacted with Comrade Maroga a lot on issues of electricity. So just to debunk some of the problems. The problem is not that there's too much interference today. The issues of governance and accountability of Eskom, there are too many layers. I don't think that's the problem. That's a governance architecture problem which can be fixed. Now, if you're dealing with an animal like Eskom, which was both horizontally and vertically integrated monopoly, how to get it to account properly at various levels of government. It's not true that Eskom, because they had enough space, they can meet once a year. No, the Broeder Bond has always been there. But the Broeder Bond knew how to manage Eskom effectively without micromanaging everything. But they were there. To think that, no, they were just free enterprise, they worked well, it's not true. The issue is how was governance managed. That's why Eskom is with a K, not with a C. Eskom is with a K. There's a reason why. There's a reason why. I don't want to get to the issue of the cooperas. Right? Now, I think the issue is the problem statement today. As we speak here, what are the issues? I don't doubt, Chair, that if Eskom was still delivering, performing, getting the country to be electrified, doing issues around transmission, distribution properly, I don't think we'd be having this debate. So to me, the debate is not so much who owns Eskom. The issue is that Eskom is falling apart. This load shedding we're talking about is a real thing. It affects real lives. It's our aunties who are selling fat cakes who can't do that at the moment because they relied on electricity. So it's a very, very practical thing. Something has gone wrong. And it went wrong under our watchful eyes, particularly us. So I don't think part of the problems they brooded upon, there's something wrong with us, including answering the question, what type of Eskom do we want? Who must answer that question? It's been asked, it's almost 30 years now. Where were we? And then we start these discussions of now we've discovered all of a sudden that generation is separate, transmission is separate, We've always known that. We have always known that. So again, what's the problem? The big problem is a leadership problem. It's a leadership problem. Fact of the matter is that decisions that should have been made and they were not made. Secondly, we do not have the depth of leadership that we need to drive a project like South Africa with interest. Now, you might think I'm too controversial if I'm saying people outside there, they're asking questions. They're saying, no, Jeff is married in the municipals. Jeff was Minister of Energy. This one is married to, and all of them, there's energy in all of them. That's the truth. People are not stupid. That's part of the reason why we could not make proper decisions, because of vested interest. And up until we face these things, in my humble view, comrades, up until we get to that point where we have honest discussions amongst ourselves, because it's not electricity only. On ICT, what's been the problem with digital migration? From analog to digital, what's been the problem? There have been 11 ministers, 11. We could not move. It's vested interest. Whose standards, is it the West or the East? That's why things can happen. And I don't think it's because we're stupid, we don't have intellectual capacity or political will. We have those things, but we don't know how to manage those things. So that those who must lead us, that's why about the problem, my favorite president, he can make a joke and say, the core business here, being the leader of the country is almost like a side hustle. It is hurtful, comrades. You can't joke like that, not in a country like ours. So all I'm trying to say, comrades, I'm not a scientist. What I understand very well is politics and the political economy of energy in particular, right? Once you have that understanding, Comrade Jacob, what we're saying is very important. Commissar Dr. Komfemulu, whom I've invited here, is my colleague and my comrade, because I know he's been passionate on this debate for a very long time. He writes about it, he asks questions. The questions I'm raising, but we're scared of raising these questions. December is around the corner, might be ambition, this might be a career-limiting move. Did you hear what he's saying? But this is the truth. If we are committed to our country, to say, let's fix these things, comrades. Because once we have very clear structures of governing, these artificial debates will end. Two centers of power, nonsense. There's no such a thing, right? If we say you are a head of state, the Constitution spells out what your responsibility are. You might still be our member. But if the strategic center of power is the ANC, whoever leads the ANC will be giving direction to the government. So if it means some of the people, we are not going to be head of state and president of the ANC. Because remember, the president of the country, we are head of state. We are head of the party. Sometimes there are problems there. There are problems. How do we ensure that there's proper accountability? So I did not mean to take much, comrades, but all that I wanted to say is, if you can't fix the leadership problem, South Africa must forget it. You could have 20 freedom charters if you like. You will have them adopt them and not implement them. What difference does it make? So that is where we are from where I'm sitting, is that we're not prepared to take clear decisions and make mistakes. There's nothing wrong in taking clear decisions with honest intentions. And if you go wrong, we are able to say, this was the intention, however, it didn't work like this. So here we're playing games with each other. I can recite by heart resolutions around energy. And not only from 1992 with Ready to Govern, but from the African claims on what our attitude has always been about running a country that serves its own people. So we've not matured to that level. That's why we are here. We'll be told, no, we'll have another company, the company of companies, you know, change the accounting lines from this box to, I mean, please, really, we can't be doing that. Not at this point. So including the issues that comrade we're raising about coal, you're 100% spot on. We have abundance, coal in abundance, our natural endowment. We'll have coal for millions of years. But it must be us who must do research and development on how to clean up our coal. It's a science, this thing. There's a microwave technology, because coal can be broken down into its various elements, whether the humidity, the sulfur content. What is important in it is this calorific value, the burning capacity of it to generate the energy we need. Science knows how to get these things. But who's investing on it? Why must America invest in it? They don't have coal in abundance. The most big word we have used, which unfortunately very few people know about, gas, oil, coal, they are all fossil fuels. Russia is supplying this gas, the whole of Europe. It's not a big issue. China will try and even try to frack here. The environment is a scare. You'll poison our water, you'll do all of those things. So I'm not saying we must be denialist and say there are no environmental issues. There are trade-offs in every decision you make in life. There are trade-offs. So for me, it's that simple thing that is missing in our country. And up until we come to it, you'll ask all of those ministers, white paper, white paper. Abo Peggy, izandla nenyawo, they're trapped. Akulaleki ebusuku. Yaba? Abantu bakokota, go this way or that way. That's our problem here. It's not because of any other scientific problems. Eskom lights can't be on now. Yes, in the past they were serving few people, but now it's for everybody, right? How to duplicate the skill, continue to do the training. The institutions are there, and I think we have good people in this country. It's just that we're trapped in bad politics. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Thabo Mashukwane. It's difficult to come after Comrade Brian. Yeah, I think mine is simple. Is to ask about the silver bullet solutions on two things. One is, how do we solve the slow shedding? It's a problem that is there, and we need to deal with it. And another one is the elephant in the room, which is the 400 billion rands debt elephant in the room. How do we deal with it as well? If we can maybe get direction from that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the first one, Chairperson, you raised was the issue of the price increases. I think to answer it, let me just tell you how Eskom derives its revenue. Then you'll understand the problem. So, Eskom derives its revenue from tariffs, and it projects what sales it's going to have, and out of that sales, it divides every unit, right, that is going to be sold, and say, this is the revenue I want. Now, the problem with Eskom, when the revenue comes down, it means for the same income, it must raise the price of electricity to balance out, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, if its costs go up, particularly the capital cost and the borrowing cost, it must recover it from the consumers. So it's in a spiral. It's called a spiral where when the sales goes down, you increase the price, and if it goes down any further, you increase the price again. There is that spiral. And the problem with that spiral came from the fact that government never capitalized Eskom. If you are a shareholder and you go, if you're a company and you're going into a huge capital expansion, some of that money must actually be an injection. So in the end, the government end up injecting afterwards with bailouts. It should have injected at the beginning. That's one of the problems. I just want to give you that context in terms of the price increases. And let me just say to Comrade Brian that, look, I think what you've just said, for me, those are the kind of discussions that needs to be had in policy environments. The rest is detail. Because if you have the line of march in terms of leadership, where you want to go, then most of the things could be solved. Who is in the board of Eskom, if it's in the context of what you've just said, then it becomes detail. Right? You can't be arguing about boards if you have not argued about where we're going. So I just want to confirm that. Then there's a question here about demand versus capacity. What is the problem at Eskom? The problem is that the current fleet is not performing to why it should be. Right? Now, they're giving too many excuses. Sabotage, low-grade coal, no skills. I'm not too sure whether those are real reasons. But if you are given a task and you've assessed the environment, you shouldn't be giving us reasons why you are not dealing with those things. If you need to be holistically looking at this thing and say, how do I make sure I deliver? So we're getting too many excuses and we're accepting them, and that's the problem. So things like low-grade coal and all of those kind of things. State-owned mining company, it was meant to play a role, but the current architecture of coal and power station has been you tie the power station to a coal mine and you tie it over 40 years. It has worked for Eskom in terms of making sure you've got availability of coal and you can actually manage the cost down. But in the past few years, that has been an area which has been left to erode. So cost, quality, and availability of coal became problems. That's where we are. The Inga, and I've talked about the Inga project. Lots of capacity there, but we can't solve the politics to bring the thing economically. And also, as South Africa, it's also an energy security issue. Let me just give you an example. If you decide, for instance, we're not going to build any power station, we're going to depend on what comes from Inga, and they do a Russia on you, where are you going to be? Do you understand? So, but if we can, but it's also those things that I think at an African leadership perspective we need to be thinking about. Why is SADC not integrating much more? Not loose arrangements, almost like the European Union is trying to make a European government. Now, so that you can start talking about this big strategic issue. NATO, the NATO alliance, is a real thing. If you touch one of the NATO members, the other are bound to go in. So we've got so much energy, but we're sort of playing around with it. And I think economically, geopolitically, if SADC does not step to the plate to say, how do we play in this geopolitical scheme and how do we use our resources and how do we deal with the Europe in a united fashion, we're not going to be able to do those things. So China will come and manage Inga just now, and then you've got no control what's going to happen. So those are the kind of things that we need to look at. And I think it goes to the question of minerals for renewables. Are we, as Africa, strategically looking at those resources that are important to the new energy economy, and how do we manage those minerals strategically so that we have leverage? The issue of geopolitics and BRICS, I think, it's the same thing. And maybe, let me also just say this, because you see, when you go into an Eskom, coming 1995, you go into an Eskom, you go into a Sasol, and you look at how these guys from, I mean, Eskom was started in 1923. It was not there. It was nothing like called Eskom. Sasol, 1950, it was not there. But it became the largest coal to gas company in the world. What does it say? The Afrikaners took themselves seriously. They knew the world is going to be against them. But the assertiveness to say, Iran switches off the oil. In 6 months, they decide to do Sasol 2 and 3, right? So those kind of assertiveness to say we take our sovereignty very seriously. When we came, I used to look at the figures of how much gold, even when we were, lower, we still the biggest producer of gold. But and now we about 80% of platinum, right? But we have never sat down and said, strategically, how are we going to use this mineral? Right? And maybe, Comrade Brian, the problem is some of the comrades are looking at this mineral and say, how do I get a pie of this mineral, as opposed to strategically for the country, where should we go with this mineral? Okay, so those are key. I mean, how can we have 90% of platinum, but you don't? And platinum is going to be an important mineral going forward in the scheme of green, and So those are the kind of things that I think we need to be looking at. Now, national interest versus energy security, and I think we've seen what Europe is going through. Right? So, Europe, particularly Germany, its energy security depended on natural gas from Russia and renewables, right? And with the Ukrainian war, the thing collapsed. So they are bailing out companies, private companies, who were in the architecture of natural gas from Russia, because energy security, they can't allow those companies to collapse, because energy security is tied to national security. And we, in fact, you see, the European countries are much more, in terms of energy security, much less vulnerable. Because you see, Germany is in the middle of Europe. They've got France next to them. They've got the Norwegian countries next to them. They've got Britain next to them. And if their energy security is threatened, they can still play around within Germany. In South Africa, you go switch off your coal and there's nothing else. Where are you going to go? Just geographically, where are you going to go? So those things are very important. Then the issue of the climate change funding. I think, for me, that thing is gone. Because, you see, this was done last year, COP26, where the rich country says, we will sponsor you to move away from coal to renewables. That was the promise. Now, the same companies, their energy transition have collapsed. Right? The energy transition of Germany was based on renewables and Russian gas. Russian gas is gone. Companies are being bailed out. Their citizens are not going to allow them to put 136 billion to an African country to, right? No, so that thing is gone. Germany, Europe is in crisis, in an energy crisis. It's not going to sponsor somebody's energy transition. Forget about it, right? So I think, in my view, this thing is now, we're just playing. Okay? Yeah, I can comment about the politics, but let me stick to my trade. The 400 billion debt, let me just tell you how it came about. So, government needed to capitalize Eskom in the beginning, but they decided on something else. They said, no, we can't capitalize you. We want you to fund the build with tariffs and borrowings. If you can't get borrowings, we will guarantee your borrowings. There's in the contingency liability of government, there's about 350 billion to guarantee Eskom debt. So this 450 billion didn't just arrive, it was actually intentional that Eskom will fund its build through tariffs and borrowings. If tariffs are low, then you borrow more. That's how this thing was dealt with. Now it looks as if it's a mistake. No, it was intentional. Either you put in capital as the state, or the customers pay for it, or you go and borrow. So that's where it came from. Yeah, let me stop.
Thank you, comrades. I'm just looking at the time, and I don't mean to suppress anyone, but there's something that I would like to share, actually, and this is provoked by Comrade Brian's comment about abantu baboshwe izandla neenyawo. A few years back, we had Comrade Ahmed Kathrada at Lily's Leaf. And the question was posed to him that why he has never taken any directorship in any of the private companies. And his answer was simple. You must decide where you want to play, in fact. I'm paraphrasing. And then he said, you can't be a regulator and someone who wants to monitor and at the same time play on the other side. Because then, in fact, the point that he made said, you will be conflicted. If you want to be in politics and be a regulator, play in that space. If you want to be in business, play in that space. You can't play a dual role because conflict is a very difficult thing to manage. Even if you can say, I'll listen to my conscience. When I'm conflicted, I'll recuse myself. No. And I think it's probably something that all of us in this room, we must start to think about it. You can't manage conflict, especially when we talk about commercial interest. It's very difficult. I thought I should share that story because I thought for me it was quite profound. Let me take the last hands, comrade. And I think it will be a move, ne? Hamilton, let me start with you. And then comrade will be next. And then Dr. Can I get Dr. Man? It's Confi. And then Mama, you'll be, and then it will be comrade Lana. Ne? Yeah, sorry if I'm Ketang, I'm sorry, comrades, but we're just trying to manage time. Comrade Hamilton.
Good afternoon, comrades. Thank you very much, Comrade Maroga, for the presentation. I think from my side, it is clear that Eskom needs people with requisite capacity to perhaps turn things around there, because the current leader, we, with due respect, doubt that he is the relevant person, to steer that ship towards the right direction. I didn't hear you touching on the energy distribution part of Eskom, because currently the main focus is on energy generation. But there are serious challenges also with regards to the distribution of energy. I remember at some point there were some talks about REDs, the regional things, distributors. But over and above that, also, there were some suggestions that, for our ordinary people, solar geysers will be rolled out to ease pressure, from the grid. At some point, there were billions that were set aside to roll out solar water geysers across the country. I don't know what happened there. If you could perhaps share some insight around that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Speaker. I think I've been waiting for this moment for a while. My question has now become a comment. I think, firstly, thank you for some insights, very key. But my thought process and what I want to gather from you is around the debt problem. So if you think about what e-tolls have become, it was a user pay principle. Sanral goes and borrows, and then when the public revolted, it's now a public's problem. At some point, we will have to pay it through taxes. Exactly the same problem with Eskom. We are saying there's a 350 billion rand contingency debt that has been used up. And for Eskom to pay it, they must be able to sell electricity. But now there's two factors. People are going off grid with solar, and then we are saying involve these IPPs to compete with Eskom at a generation level. So if you cannot generate and you've got people that are self-sufficient, how the hell are we going to pay the 400? That's the one thing. I think the second thing, then you then look at who is then funding Eskom's debt obligations of future capital raising. There's this thing called the ESG index. That is an index where they rate corporate companies on products that they choose or projects that they choose. So if you're environmentally savvy and you choose to fund IPPs or renewables, you get a tick. So the ESG index celebrates companies that are moving away from coal-based projects. In fact, there's financial institutions now that have said they are now moving away completely from funding future coal projects. How are we then going to use this natural endowment of ours to really propel and strategically get ourselves out of this rut? And I think my question then, in summation, is how is the 400 billion rand debt, the ESG index situation, pivoting on the policy discussion that you're going to have on the energy mix, and how would it affect which energy mix do we choose, really? Thank you.
You know what? I'm tired of Eskom. Really, I'm very tired and I'm very cross. We're fighting for South Africa. This is our land. Now they started now to do load shedding. It's Eskom. And then they said, our electricity is cheaper. Yes, they're supposed to be cheaper. Because in 1994, when NC started to be in South Africa, they take the money and go there in overseas. And now, because we want the land now, they're telling us about a cheaper electricity, whatever. Eskom, they can take the Eskom, they can stay there away with the Eskom, but we need the land. Whatever they can do, we'll fight till we get the land. They mustn't play a game with us. This is not a playing. We got RDP houses. Children are not working. We got children who are coming from school, who finish the matric, who finish university. They're not working. They're just staying at home. Where are we going to get money to pay the expensive electricity? At the end of the day, they will say, no, the people who rich, who got money, they must stay in the light and us must stay in the dark. They can go to hell. They don't know us. They must ask them. When we fight in 1956, our mothers were fighting for South Africa, and we're going to fight. And still, I'm still alive. We're going to win this.
No, that's fine.
Good afternoon, comrades. And all right. Thank you very much, comrade, for allowing me to ask a question and making comments. And my apology for arriving late. I'm a visitor from Ekurhuleni, George Bezos branch, ANC branch in Ward 20. And I got late because I was just involved in another work that was on organizational renewal. Please allow me to state these three things first. That I do believe in simplicity of approach and understanding, even on matters energy, because if we don't simplify what we are talking about, we all end up getting confused and people not understanding what we are talking about. For example, when we talk about energy and environment, there are people who are arguing that in fact Africa should be leading in terms of being a thought leader. Because in Africa, if we were to look back, you'll find people like Wangari Maathai's approach of protection to the environment and reforestation versus the key policy imperative that is being pushed of Al Gore, the United Nations and liberals, where they most of the time focus only on greenhouse emission. The second thing is that our discussions are not just for discussion's sake, as Comrade Brian said, but it is discussions because we are in a business of positive change for the better in making sure that the quality of life of our people improve. The third issue, comrades, is that the end point of our discussions should always be what action are we going to take? And that is why in many instances we ask ourselves the question, what is to be done? So over and above what Tate Maroga said, I think that it is very important for all of us when we are discussing these issues. As we come here, they say those that gather in, one or two gather in my name, but we gather in the name of the ANC. So it is very important that whatever that we are discussing, we must discuss it within the ANC policy context, so that we understand what we are saying as the ANC to find solutions towards sustainable energy provision. The other thing is that we have got always to keep in mind what are South African national interests. So our discussion of Eskom must not just be done as a standalone thing, but it must be done in the context of the ANC and government policy and programs, but also ANC and government policy programs on SOEs. Because whatever that is happening in Eskom, we see it happening elsewhere. The other thing is that I do believe that our energy problems and our energy wars and struggles are classically what I would say is a class issue. If we interrogate properly what is happening, we will realize that it can be solved with the involvement of ordinary members of the ANC and communities. As Mama was saying there just now, no private company subscribe to the notion of energy as a basic right. Ntate Maroga said it in some forum, and I found it to be very touching that in fact the only time when the IPPs came on board into the energy play is when it was guaranteed that they will make profit. Now, comrades were talking about the China model. And interestingly, we do not many a times interrogate what the China model is. But having done a little bit of walking around in China, I realized that it is very simple. China builds state-owned entities such as the China State Construction and Engineering Company. And it makes those to be 100% state-owned. But under those 100% state-owned entities, it then established private-public partnerships as subsidiaries that are listed in the Shanghai Beijing Stock Exchange. But it always makes sure that the subsidiaries are at least 51% state-owned, for one simple reason, that when those PPPs come with new ideas like the the what we call the intellectual property, that intellectual property automatically accrues and gets owned by the people, by the state. That is why you find that China now can make cars and all that. Now we have been speaking also about the balanced energy mix, where we refer to fossil fuels as we refer to coal, oil and gas. I find it very interesting that this simple thing sometimes seems to be escaping our minds. You can't tell me that I can go and I must not use, that I can drink water and I can use steam, but I must not use ice because it's poisonous. What I'm saying here is that coal, oil and gas are in fact fossil fuels. And all these have got to be deployed, but we must deploy them using appropriate technology that causes minimal or no damage to the environment. Those of you who might have observed the war that was in northern Mozambique, the USA and Europe entered that war because they wanted to ensure ownership of oil and gas fields, which is an insurance and a guarantee of energy security for these countries and their companies for hundreds of years to come. So you take the water and the steam, but we who are having our ice, which we have more than 500 reserves, 500 years of reserves, you said we must not use it because it's poisonous. It does not make sense. Now, on the issue of nuclear, we must bear in mind that one of the things that is the most critical things around SOEs is the issue of common ownership of the means of production. Now, the people that are implementing government policy that is against ANC policy, in fact, they are compromising the issue of common ownership of the means of production. Now, people like Dr. Cronje, the former CEO of the South African Institute of Race Relations, who's a representative of the liberals, interestingly, his argument is that we must use nuclear power. And he is even more specific. He says we must use the people-built modular reactor technology. But he then quickly says that technology must not be in the hands of the state. It must be in the hands of many who are in the private sector, who will then deploy it for purchase by government. Now we need to be looking at some of those things. If I may just say, if you were to ask me as to what do I think we need to do, I think that we must implement ANC policy and find that the ANC policy must be implemented. And if anyone says to me, what is ANC policy? I will say, go and start by looking at ready to govern. You will find that you have got the foundation of ANC energy policy there. We must stop all the moves that are aimed at the privatization of Eskom and other large public or state-owned assets, whose purpose is to protect strategic sectors of the economy. That includes energy, transport, iron, steel, and cement. I am saying this because if you can just imagine, if we want to put speed trains from Cape Town to Messina, from Durban to Port Nolloth, if we were to buy iron, steel, and cement and energy from the private sector, there's no way that we can be able to afford it. The third thing is that we must get competent leadership that will get Eskom to deliver on its mandate. And the mandate of Eskom is simple: make energy available to all the people and to the economy. Now, if we find that all those people that are deployed, whether it is the technicians or is the minister, that they are not delivering on the mandate, we must not hesitate. They must go. Now, the other thing is that we must maintain the current energy capacity, energy generation capacity, whilst increasing the availability of energy to the citizenry. Because what Dr. Maroga has said on a number of occasions is that if you look at the energy that is being produced, it can be able to supply the economy in South Africa. But the energy that is available, it is not enough. So we have got to make it enough. Now, the other thing is we have to look at the possibility of reactivating mothballed coal-fired power stations But most importantly, we should be looking at the future. We must build new coal-fired power stations, get our colleges and universities to research and come up with technology, and also build nuclear-fired power stations. Thank you, comrades.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. It's quite difficult to speak after such a clear engagement, but nonetheless, I can assure you that I will be very short, Comrade Chair. Okay, no, thanks. I think, Chair, from my side, just two things. The first one is what Ntate spoke about, or the comrade spoke about, as the gentleman said, we must call him comrade, is to talk about taxonomy, right? The fact that now gas and nuclear has not been afforded to be accredited as green. But the disclaimer there was that nuclear will only be accredited green for those that are existing, not for the ones that will be built in future. Now, the question is, will we still forge ahead with building nuclear? Because Mama spoke about, she's tired of Eskom. And I think we all know that the solution there, colleagues, would be nuclear. It's reliable, it's clean. Yes, there's a danger aspect, but it can be mitigated. Now, will we, as the ANC, be able to, join these forums that speaks about, taxonomy, that speaks about, ESGs, that speaks about, the green economy, so that we can also, inform them and say, by colleagues, can we, as African countries as well, build, our own power stations? I think this takes me to my second point of ESGs. Colleagues, we can't escape the ESG economy. In 2025, ESGs will be mandatory for all companies and governments that want money from financial institutions. The JSC has already released their ESG sustainability guidelines for their companies that are listed to prepare them for 2022. Now, my fear there, colleagues, is that we have an unemployment crisis in the country. Now, this ESG economy is going to be a career path in 2025. By that I mean, already there's an institution called the ESG Exchange that works with the Good Governance Exchange, right? They offer training for individuals within companies or individuals alone, for them to be able to become competent persons to afford these certificates to companies come 2025. Now, my fear is that come 2025, we will still be grappled with an industry that's new, and we will still go on media and cry foul and say, but there's no transformation here. But we have, until now, until 2025, to ensure that as many as of our comrades, young people in particular, go into that field, they do the course, they become accredited, and then they can actually earn a living come 2025. Now, the risk, or rather the difficulty there, is that the course is 80,000. And the course is even priced in dollars. So clearly, it's not for me and you. It's for other people; they can afford it. But due to the internet, we have access to information. So I want to challenge the branch, Comrade Chair. I think my name is Ayavuya Madolo. I am a new member of the branch, of this particular branch. I come from a branch in the Free State, Herigwala. branch, Ward 14, and in Bloemfontein. So I'm a new member this side. So I want to challenge the branch and say, colleagues, can we raise money from different sources? It can be CETAs, it can be from business people. Let's take young people to go do this course. Because ESG is going to come. Yes, some of us must pull one direction. Some of us must also pull the other direction. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves in a state whereby we pulled one direction, but the world has went one direction, and we are forced to go this direction eventually. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you for the comments, comrades. Comrades, I think on this issue of ESG, we need to, in fact, I've already spoken to Barbara Chris about it, that we need to unpack it, because, sometimes we need to be very careful as to who's driving the agenda and, to what end. Because I think in our discussion we also talk about now, when you want money, to fund your business, this type of climate change or emissions, this report you need to produce, that will then, it drives a particular economy and a particular narrative and agenda, and who is going to benefit on the other side. I'm not saying we should not be open to new ideas as to what is happening, and especially if those things are going to help us develop as a society or as a nation. But it's also important to also think beyond what is actually being proposed, and especially when they're going to put some locks and nuts in order that you can't move if you don't do this, because I don't think then it comes as a genuine proposition, as it were. But it's a debate for another session, but we will definitely have a debate on that, because I think it is quite important. Because earlier I spoke about the power dynamics. There are bullies out there, whether we like it or not, in the global world, and we need to be careful in which how then do we maneuver, in order to align, or when do we retreat, and how then do we prepare ourselves at the same time, so that the impact of it, is not felt severely, internally. Comrade.
I think most of the questions were comments, other than the one that talks about we're focusing on generation, but we're not focusing on distribution, which is a true, and I can make this comment because it brings me to this comment, that other than the 1998 electricity white paper, we haven't developed any comprehensive, integrated energy vision for South Africa. We do things as we go along. One day we think we're going to go for coal, one day we debate it not, but it's not an integrated strategy that talks to maybe 100-year vision of energy, because energy, you have to think that way, right? You have to think 25, 50, 100 years, because you cannot just disrupt your energy system tomorrow because it's a new fad. You need to be thinking that long term, and we don't have that. That's why we have this issue. So I agree, we are not focusing on the distribution. It's the technology, the viability, and the municipal space in terms of service delivery, financial health. So those are the issues that I think we need to think about. But let me make my closing comment, and I'm going to venture into politics here. And I think we must connect things. What is happening in the energy space is not isolated to the geopolitics of the world. What's happening in our country, because one of the things, and I'm talking to ANC comrades here, one of the things that's beginning to emerge is the legitimacy of 1994 liberation, right? And it comes in this particular form. You've been governing this country since 1994. You can no longer blame anybody for the poverty. Anything that is wrong in this country, you can't blame anybody because you've been governing for the last 28 years. The question is, the problem, in fact, the biggest risk is that in some people's mind, that becomes actually a legitimate issue to say, yeah, Mara, this guy has been running for 28 years, so we can't be blaming apartheid. I think even the individual mistakes of the ANC, you must never think that all of that is a legitimate excuse to delegitimize the liberation achievement. Because when you thought that was liberation, others were seeing it as a new installment, how to manage natives in Africa. So including the delegitimization of genuine liberation movements. So it's important that I think we take that into account. And some of the things that are happening are not unconnected. Okay? So it's important that we think about it. And let me also say this, that the global north, which we call the West, has been running the world for 500 years. They've developed sophisticated system of taking things from one place to another. We as South Africa were the last data point in terms of liberation, right? Now, in fact, people can say liberation of Africa was a failure. Look at the last data point, which is South Africa. But for me, the African agenda is the thing that we need to continuously think about. The seeming failure of South Africa is going to be, collected as an African failure, and we're the last data point. And we need to be clear what the agenda is. And lastly, on the energy. So there is a move in terms of what should happen to this energy crisis. There is a coalition, a coming together of forces of, some of these NGOs, OUTA, Business Unity South Africa, Business Leadership South Africa, AfriForum. They are singing one hymn sheet: renewables, battery storage, but take over the planning of the energy system. There is a report called the Meridian Report, which is sort of the Bible for this. Meridian Report, all right? And you go and read the Meridian Report and say, who sponsored it, all right? Open Society Foundation, George Soros, and the European Climate Change Foundation are sponsoring that report. And people are coalescing around that, and they're actually forcing it down to government. So we must watch what's going to happen with the announcement, because I think the president is still owing us a family meeting around load shedding. We must watch that, because if we're not careful, the energy system is gone.
No. Thank you very much, Comrade Brown. And I know that I said that is the last question, but I have to do justice to, there were some comments which came through the people who are listening online. I think just a question here from Comrade 2. So it says, a clarification question. Does industry still consume over 40% of energy produced, and their prices are still paying at a less price? I think there has been some discussion that there were certain concessions or certain price negotiations that were done to maybe your BHP bulletins and so forth for them to pay at a lower price than what we normally consume. So I think the question is this thing still going on, or to your knowledge? That is.
Okay. As I said, Eskom was actually built to power industry. You see, It's only lately when Eskom started even supplying the municipalities. Municipalities used to have their own power stations. Kelvin Power Station, Gemeshin Power Station, PE. So Eskom was focusing on the industry and mostly mines, right? So that was their model. When they started having excess capacity, they actually paid municipalities to shut down their power station so that they can use Eskom power. So that's the first thing that I must, So the whole architecture of Eskom is to support industry. Pricing structure, network access is about industry. Then when we had excess capacity to attract smelters, we gave them long-term, very lucrative pricing based on the commodity. In fact, what we did was we will link the price of electricity to the price of your commodity, right? So if your commodity price goes down, your price also goes down. If it goes up, then we also share. Those are still in the Eskom system, but they're trying to manage the impact of the to Eskom by trying to renegotiate. But yes, those special pricing agreements are still there, I think let me just confirm that. Yeah, okay. Thanks. Okay,
thank you very much, comrades. This brings us to the end of this session, and like I say, I think in our own spaces, it's also very important to reflect and research further about this subject. At least one can say that we have some form of a base, in terms of the understanding. But, I can't start to compare 30 years of experience with zero experience. But I think, to the credit, comrade, I think you've managed to unpack and give context, and the history as well is very, very important, because we can't just look at things at the tail end. You say, hey, why are we about my price amangani? And I think that context is also very important, and I really, really appreciate for taking time to spend the afternoon with us. Comrade Vuyo, I think, it's just a small token of appreciation. And thank you very much for spending the afternoon with us. Comrade, time now is 16:19. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.